I don't know if Josh is too young to remember that. Josh Ward of the Sports Animal joins us now. Do you remember that video in which Jerry Green couldn't remember which school hired him? Josh, good morning. Oh, we're having trouble with Josh's audio. I think we're having trouble with your audio on your end. Are we all locked in there? Try again, Josh.
So, Dave,
There
do you
you
know
are.
if
There
it
you are. There you are.
does it work better when the mic is turned on or off? Which is the more effective method? Is that a better introduction than Jerry Green's or worse? Which one?
I
Yeah,
remember my first day in radio.
yeah. I'll bet Jerry Green wishes that day that his mic wasn't working, so nobody could hear that he didn't know where he was working.
Well, the mic
So
wasn't working when Rick Barnes was hired. Who remembers that press conference?
the mic had issues that day as well. But yeah, the fear at the time, because remember, things could have been going better for UT athletics at the time, was that, oh no, this is not a good sign of what's to come. But things have actually gone better for Tennessee athletics since then. So it's not always an indication of what's happening next.
Well, I'll ask you today's tough question brought to you by Andy Mason Real Estate. Go to andymasonrealestate.com, save thousands or tens of thousands. Is Tennessee the best team, or is Tennessee the best basketball program to never reach a Final Four? There are other programs that have big time funding, like Alabama. There are some like Xavier that place more of an emphasis on basketball, but it is a little bit stunning with all the names that you go back in Tennessee history that they have not made the Final Four once. Josh, does that not blow you away a little bit?
Besides seeing how things have played out, yeah, it is a little stunning considering the resources. They've had good coaches, they've had some great players along the way, and they've had opportunities, Sweet 16 appearances where you could very easily see two more wins to get to the Final Four. They have the one Elite Eight appearance where it came down to the very end and almost got in. But yeah, considering how good Tennessee actually has been a number of times and how many good players they've had and the money that is put into Tennessee basketball overall, yeah, you would think that they would get there considering other programs like VCU can get there and George Mason can get there. Then, yeah, you would think Tennessee could get there at some point.
And some big names. Caleb, go ahead and jump in there when you start talking about different decades of Ernie and Bernie and all of those guys, and Caleb mentioned them before you came on. I mean, there's just an awful lot of history, Caleb, for Tennessee not to make the tournament, and some of that history, as we talked about, was under Jerry Green. So, but at least he knew where he was hired. So, go ahead, Caleb. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I agree. And one of the things that really stands out is Tennessee Thompson Bowling is one of the 5 biggest arenas in college basketball. And there's of the 4 ahead of them, one of them is a football arena, the Carrier Dome, and so that doesn't really even count. By the way, my condolences to Brent Axe. What ESPN Syracuse did was disgraceful. Just wanted to throw that out there to fire somebody for being too critical of the program. But anyways, what Tennessee has a top 5 arena that was larger than Rupp for a long time until recently, I think. They have, you're right, a lot of resources, a lot of tradition, a lot of great players. And I think Josh brought up a great point, an incredible set of opportunities to get to the national title. I mean, I don't know if the program will ever get over that 2000 loss to North Carolina, because it was the red carpet to the national championship game was laid out, because had they beaten North Carolina, they would have played Tulsa in the Elite Eight. Then they would have played Florida in the Final Four, and they had swept Florida that year. So I just, that talk about opportunities wasted.
By the way, Josh, that's Mark Packer's fault, because he came up to me and said, it looks like Tennessee's going to beat North Carolina. And at that very moment, we were on the sideline. At that very moment, Brendan Haywood got in foul trouble. In comes this guy named Julius Peppers. You're like, wow, he's got a lot of muscles. Yeah. And the next thing you know, that game flip-flopped as soon as Mark Packer said that. It's his fault.
Yeah, see, that's ahead of this time. Today, if Mark Packer were to do that, that's when you immediately pull out your phone and you bet on the other side, because that has just completely jinxed. That's roses in the mouth 0-1 after a win against Florida move. Like, I don't know about this move here. But that's part of it. Like, I think Tennessee fans feel like there's just this snake bit issue with the tournament for whatever reason. Recent history would include Kyle Alexander's injury against Loyola Chicago, where you want to talk about a road to the Final Four. Loyola Chicago took it after beating Tennessee in that second round matchup. The Purdue game with the questionable call there late in the game just a few years ago with Lamonte Turner's foul. So they've had opportunities to get there. I already mentioned the Elite Eight, the Jarnell Stokes play late against Michigan. If you win that game, you're in the Elite Eight and just needing to win one more to go to the Final Four. So they've had shots, they've had teams. Sometimes, though, when Tennessee's made the run, they didn't enter the tournament getting all kinds of buzz. The Elite Eight team was a 6 seed. The team that played against Michigan in the Sweet 16 in 2014 was in the play-in round as an 11 seed. But upsets along the way, like going into this tournament, we're talking about Duke in the next round, which could be the matchup for sure, but it's not guaranteed. There's a chance they get upset, just like Georgetown as a 3 seed got upset in 2010 when Tennessee was a 6 seed. Yeah, by Ohio. So Mercer upset Duke, speaking of Duke, in that 2014 round. So you never know what the matchups are going to be. And often Tennessee as the underdog, which actually it isn't by the odds makers here, but by the mood of the fan base right now, the mood of the fan base is not, here we go, Final Four this year. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but typically a lot of the success has come when it was not expected.
We also forgot about one big heartbreak, the 20-point blown lead against Ohio State in the 2007 Sweet 16 when they were up on Greg Oden and Mike Conley by 20 points, and then Ohio State came back and won and then went to the national title game.
Ouch.
Yeah, fans, they had a little bit of room left on their list of heartbreaks, so we were able to squeeze that one in for them too.
I think a lot of people got over that game because, like, you knew everybody was coming back the next year, and you knew that team was going to be loaded. But, like, looking back, it's like, wow, that team would have gone to the national title game.
Yeah, that team went on. So, speaking of roadmaps, it was right there. And then the next year is when Tennessee was the number one team in the country, and they have Chris Lofton, not known at the time, but battling through cancer. But they get to that Sweet 16 matchup against Louisville, and it was just a matchup nightmare. They had a bunch of guys that were 6'6" to 6'9" that were long, headed to the NBA because of their measurables, and that was just a bad matchup for Tennessee, which was smaller in the backcourt. And that one of the great teams in Tennessee basketball history ran into a roadblock that was not going to allow it to move on.
Yeah, we wouldn't even mention Southwest Missouri State or the game before that gets overlooked. I think it was a 45-41 win over Delaware that set basketball back about 8 decades. That was awful to have to drive to Charlotte and see that. So, not to put you on the spot, Josh's appearance is brought to you by Azul Beer, the official craft beer of Off the Hook Sports, xulbeer.com. Worldwide award-winning craft beer, and they've got parking in downtown Knoxville, which you don't hear from that a lot. But what is the most heartbreaking loss? I want to ask both of you guys. Josh, let me start with you. To me, the Southwest Missouri State was one that it was a 30-point loss to a directional school at a very talented team that Delaware should have gotten their attention in the opening round. That, to me, is still the heartbreaker. So let me throw this out to both of you. What is Tennessee's worst loss and best win in NCAA tournament history? I'll give you guys both time to think about it. Josh, throw one out there. I'll go Southwest Missouri State.
Yeah, I still think the Elite Eight loss, because that is your shot at the Final Four. And the run was so fun, and it came down to the very end. Missed free throw, then play in transition for Michigan State, and they're able to score, and game's over, and your season's over. Instead of going to the Final Four, which moments later you thought had a really good chance to do. So to me, because of how close Tennessee was and the first actual opportunity to go to the Final Four, and to this point, still the only Final Four, we wouldn't be having this conversation if the game goes the other way. We wouldn't be talking about, can you believe Tennessee's never been to the Final Four? And if they had played in it, who knows what would have happened after that. So I would have to go with the Michigan State loss in the Elite Eight.
Yeah, I'm also going to, my second, though, is that damn Mark Packer game.
Well,
was that because of the game or because of the trip you were going to be able to potentially take that year because of your travel plans?
That was it.
Like when you bring up 0-1 LSU, Dave, you have to make sure the audience knows that you're not worried about whether Tennessee was going to the national title game. You're upset because your trip to Pasadena got canceled.
No, the Marriott Manhattan Beach was booked. Yeah. At halftime. I'm the one that messed all of that up.
But then you got to go to Disney World.
Yeah, that place is hell on earth. Have you done the Disney World thing with the kids yet, Josh?
No, we have not. We will fairly soon. We actually have a semi advantage to the typical setup. There is we have family about an hour away, so we can do a day trip instead of having to book this long trip just to Disney World. We can go visit family and then work in Disney World. So we'll be fine once we do that.
I had free tickets working for ESPN, and I remember being there and paying $50 to park. And my daughter said, "Can we go someplace closer, like Dollywood?" I just wanted to absolutely rip my steering wheel out of the mount and throw it out of the car. All right, so Caleb, what's the best win? Let me start with you, and I'll go to Josh. What's the best win for Tennessee in the NCAA tournament?
Well, just to disagree with both y'all real quick, my worst loss is still that Ohio State game, but in 2007. But because that's the Michigan State game, that was a back and forth. Ohio State, they had no business losing. They were up by 20. But as far as the best win, I think it's the Ohio State win 2 years later when they got, or 2 years later when they got revenge, when they got to their first Elite Eight. That was a thrilling back and forth. Ohio State was a 2 seed. Evan Turner was the clear-cut number 2 pick in the NBA draft behind John Wall. And JP Prince has a clean block, one of the most beautiful blocks you'll ever see on an attempted game-tying 3. And Tennessee goes to the first Elite Eight. So, yeah, 2010 versus Ohio State. Tennessee's a 6 seed. Ohio State's a 2 seed. Tennessee wins in the Sweet 16.
So, Josh, what do you think? Best win for Tennessee in the tournament?
Yeah, so that Ohio State win would have been on my list because of the stage and the high-profile players on Ohio State side with Evan Turner. So that's a good one. Best wins. I'm trying to think of what should count here. They didn't go because part of the issue is we always know that the end still ends up being disappointing for wherever they get to, even if it's the Sweet 16. So I'm going to say Chris Lofton's shot when Tennessee was trying to avoid the upset. You have Dane Bradshaw inbounding the ball to Chris Lofton, kind of curling around, I believe, takes the pass in the corner and falling away, hits that shot to avoid the upset. And they fell the next round. But that to me would be an all-time shot from one of your all-time best players in the NCAA tournament. So the run did not go as far as they hoped, but that spot was memorable for Tennessee fans.
Well, yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that game. It took me a second to remember the opponent.
Yeah,
and it would have been an upset. So Tennessee's best win, do we all agree? Because I'm with Josh. That's one I was going to pick. That Tennessee's best win is avoiding a major upset by falling out of bounds 3-pointer in the corner.
When Caleb's picked those good, like I might go that over mine. I'm trying to go with maybe a backup option here. But so much of the tournament is you remember the shot itself, right? It's difficult to remember a lot of the games in terms of 40 minutes of action, what happened, because there's so much back and forth. So you remember late. That's why the JP Prince block comes to mind in that spot. So that's well stated. So that might be my preferred pick. But Chris Lofton, the shot because sometimes it's what you avoided. If Tennessee had lost the game, now that's all of a sudden one of your more heartbreaking losses ever as a big favorite. Losing that early, that would have been bad.
Well, that team was I remember that team. They were so. That was Bruce Pearl's first team, and they were running 7 guys all year.
Yeah,
so they were so tired.
We talked to Dane Bradshaw about that on our radio show not long ago. It was when Chris Lofton was being honored at the Kentucky game back in January, and kind of talked about how, that might have run out of gas at that point in that season because there was so much excitement during the season. They were playing above their heads in terms of expectations. But it was also the season where we found out this Chris Lofton guy might end up leaving as a very special player in Tennessee history. So that shot added to what fans can remember about him is why I still think the win matters.
Well, guys, when you think about it, not to interrupt the flow here, but Lofton, had it not been for the cancer issue that I thought zapped his energy and maybe the desire to be that 110% committed player. I don't know. I mean, I haven't talked to him, but it definitely zapped his energy that last year at Tennessee. Wouldn't he have been a great fit in the NBA where you can shoot it from wherever you want to? I mean, maybe a little bit ahead of that curve, but I feel for Chris Lofton because I think his potential, Josh, wasn't fully reached for factors way out of his control.
Yeah, it's unfair. one, just the cancer battle that he had to go through. I would say in terms of his desire, like the idea of redshirting was there, but he knew how good that team was going to be, and he wanted to play. And the previous year, I think he considered at least entering the NBA draft, but then he finds out he has cancer, knows he can't go through the draft process. He has to go battle cancer during the offseason. But also timing. Yeah, the game shortly thereafter expanded literally so much to the outside shot mattering and the ability to pull up or hit shots from wherever being emphasized. Well, Chris would have been able to provide that. So I don't know if he would have had an NBA career, but he would have had a more fair shot in the NBA a few years later because of what his skill set was.
Yeah, when I say desire, I was thinking about the next year as he's preparing for the NBA. I mean, you have to be 110% committed athlete, and I don't know. I thought Charles Hathaway way back in the day, the blood clot medicine affected what he was able to do. I don't know if that affected Lofton or not. At the end of the day, somebody probably should have sat down with him and said, "You need a red shirt. You have cancer, for goodness sake," right? Would that have been best for all parties involved?
I mean, maybe, but they got to number one, and they had they had a terrific season. They still, Chris was, he wasn't a 6'5" guard. He still had the size that he had, and same for Juwan Smith. So that's why when people talk about matchups in the tournament, that is a perfect example. They matched up with Louisville. If they play somebody else that doesn't have that kind of talent, and once you get the Sweet 16, there are no easy games, I recognize, but from a matchup standpoint, Tennessee just didn't have a shot. I remember going to the practices leading up to the Sweet 16 and looking at Louisville in person. They had Terrence Williams. Clark was a maybe freshman 6'9" guy that was a first-round pick. It's like, Tennessee's not going to be able to go around these guys, and they couldn't. So, they play a different team. Maybe history is different for Tennessee there, and the story is incredible. If you're talking about what we know after the fact about Chris Lofton, what he had to battle through, and during the season, we're wondering what's going on with him. But Tennessee still had talent. They had Tyler Smith, who was a high level talent player in college, and Wayne Chisholm, who's a solid college player who has had a nice pro career overseas. If they run into a different team, they might win, and then they might make the Final Four, and it's the best season in Tennessee basketball history with no competitive second.
Josh, I want to ask one question about this game, but I just want to point out for history purposes, because we all have to be fair to games we didn't watch, as the history major here. The game I brought up yesterday, Dave, Dale Ellis apparently hit a game winner in 1981 to send Tennessee to its first Sweet 16 ever to beat VCU. That's probably on the list. It's just none of us remember it. But Josh, as far as this game tonight against Louisiana, we were talking about how efficient they are at shooting the three ball. Is Tennessee going to be able to effectively handle this inside-out game, though? Because Jordan Brown seems like he's I don't know how he's not playing on a major Power 5 program, given his size and his skill set.
Yeah, I mean, he did and showed that he could play at that level. Now he's dominated in the Sun Belt with the numbers he put up. Tennessee better. But they're not talking about Louisiana. They're not prolific from the outside, but they are efficient. And if they're left open to hit shots, Williams, a senior guard who's 6'3", that can really shoot, shot 40% from three this season. If he gets open looks, he's going to hit them most likely. So Tennessee needs to be locked in with its perimeter defense. The post players, it's what I included in the column at the beginning of the week. Don't worry about scoring. I mean, Olivier needs to hit some shots, but you need to defend, need to rebound effectively for 40 minutes. Because if you do, then Louisiana's probably not going to have enough opportunities. But if Brown's able to do everything that he was able to in the Sun Belt in this game, and they're able to get some open shots and they get some second chance looks, then you could be in the middle of the game and have a fight on your hands. If Tennessee plays well enough on offense and rebounds the basketball and takes care of the ball, then I don't think Louisiana has enough to keep up with Tennessee. But if they have extra opportunities, if Tennessee does have turnover issues and they do have players out of position on defense, it leads to a few extra easy buckets for Louisiana, and then they don't rebound, then Tennessee could get upset in this game.
Josh, last thing, we have been practicing because people don't identify if they're ripping me or Caleb, except sometimes I get the old guy, which is nice. And so one of us is struggling with Nico's name, and I don't know who that is, Caleb. Is that you or me?
That's you.
It's so you.
That is so you.
Such a bull. All right. So, Josh, how are you doing? Much like Tua Tagovailoa, it is important that we get this name right going into the season. So let me hear your thoughts, and then we'll hear Nico's thoughts if you're doing it the right way.
Yeah, I do okay with it. Talking fast sometimes, which I tend to do, I can stumble. But Nico Iamaleava.
Okay, let's check with Nico.
Iamaleava.
Pretty close.
I think Josh
Josh
nailed it.
may have done the best out of everybody that would say it one more time, Josh.
Nico Iamaleava.
Iamaleava.
I think I did pretty well.
I think you might have an extra vowel, though.
Iamaleava.
There you didn't, but you had another vowel a second ago.
Iamaleava. Is that 6?
Iamaleava.
I think you nailed it.
Yeah.
Josh, have a fantastic day. Listen to him on the Sports Animal from noon to 3 because you don't know who will be on at other times. He is Josh Ward. I'm Dave Hooker. Have a fantastic day, Josh.